I really want to know the creator of the heavens and the earth. This God who designed me as a creative person. We're creative people. We're designed in the image of our creator. And he made stuff out of nothing. So if we're made in his image, how are we best representing who he is? I think partly by making excellent work.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of the Two Things You Shouldn't Talk About podcast. I'm here this week with a very special guest. How would you describe yourself? Musician, record producer, Philip Zach. Welcome to the show.
Good to hear. I think you covered it there.
Yeah, well, this is the thing. It's become a bit of a trademark for me to ask everyone how they would define themselves, because sometimes, stuff comes out that just people might not think of, or you might see yourself in a different light. So, I mean, how would you describe yourself and what you're all about?
I went to art school. So I maybe primarily I'm an artist, and that comes across in through a bunch of different medium. Um, I was My daughter had a birthday yesterday, and I made her a dollhouse, and so I guess the artist in me was expressing itself through woodworking
Yeah.
and kind of carpentry. So, but most of my time is spent making music. So making music and writing songs with other artists, collaborating with people, writing my own music, writing music for film and TV and things like that.
Awesome.
Recording studio and produce artists uh, from the United States and also from Ireland.
Yeah, so we
One of
met
my
through.
favorite people ever to work with is Caleb Graham. And I can't say his name like it's supposed to be said.
Yeah, our accent is definitely a hard one to master, because it's not quite like the stereotypical Irish accent, but it's not really like anything else. I guess it's kind of close to Scottish as well, so it's sort of in between all of those things. But yeah, obviously we met through a mutual friend who recorded with you. Tell us a little bit about kind of your intro to the music industry, and when did you first start getting interested in, like you said, you're an artist, but when maybe music, when did that come into the picture?
Yeah, so I was 15 uh, when my brother had been writing some songs and he would play at talent shows and so I have three brothers, and at this time my oldest brother was he picked up the drums, and so kind of by default, since David was playing guitar and Dan was playing the drums, I had to play bass guitar, so I picked
Yeah.
up the bass and we started playing in the basement. We just we loved it, and so we played, and our friends would sit in our bedroom and listen to us play, and our parents were cool with the lamps shaking upstairs.
Yeah.
Practicing and rehearsing every day. Um, so we played every chance we could get. We played talent shows, and we bought a little sound system and set it up and played high school gymnasiums and and then college campuses and on the quad and everywhere we could play. And we put up like hundreds of posters. So we did kind of the grassroots thing for all through high school, and then I went to college in Lincoln, Nebraska. Um, and we did the same thing. We just we'd hand out thousands of flyers and put up posters, and we just wanted to play music for people, and made a couple cassette tapes
Right.
that dates the period.
Yeah.
It was like 1996, 1998. We were releasing cassette tapes,
Yeah.
and then the CDs, and then so we started touring. I dropped out of college, started playing shows, making little trips to Iowa or South Dakota, just neighboring states. And then we'd take these big long trips all the way to California.
Mm.
We found if we're booking a show in California, we should probably book a couple on the way there and on the way back,
Right.
so that we're not wasting all that gas, right?
Yeah.
So then we just built these tours, and we kind of accidentally did what people have been doing for a long time. And so we started doing that on purpose, and all four of us got serious about making booking phone calls. And so I quit school, and my little brother didn't even go to college. We just started touring. And
Wow.
so I did that for almost 10 years, and had a lot of incredible and some scary bus and van experiences in the
Wow.
snow. And consequently, I hate winter driving.
Yeah.
Met a lot of incredible people, and played music for a long time. And
So
so then I started the studio, and now I produce music. I do music more than I did when we were in the band.
So obviously you guys were serious about it. You know, you quit college, and your brother didn't even start his college. You know, was were things working out well? Like, were you successful and people were enjoying the music? What made you like commit to that in such a big way?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think a little, maybe a touch of insanity, um, plus a lot of hopeful, just the idea that we could maybe survive on this.
Right.
Uh, so we were doing a lot of weekend stuff and a lot of like summer break stuff. Um, and I was paying my way through school by, I was roofing houses, and my boss ended up, he was getting old, and he started to, he hated showing up to do the roofs. So he said, tell you what, if I take the bids, I get the material there, I'll just take a percentage, and then you just do the roof, hire on whoever you want to. So I started hiring on my three brothers,
Right.
and we'd do the roof,
Yeah.
make a pretty good amount of money, and then we'd go tour. But then we realized, if we got serious about the touring, we could just skip the whole roof thing
Yeah.
and make the same amount of money.
Yeah, sounds like a better deal to me.
Pay everybody's health insurance maybe, and some cell phones,
Yeah.
and we can make some calls and get more shows lined up. So we just started taking this more seriously. And I think it was a move that, looking back, it was not a lot of us. I think only one of us were married.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think maybe two of my brothers were married, but there weren't kids in the mix.
Yeah.
And it was just easy. Life was easier then.
Yeah, well, I mean, I kind of relate to that a little bit because, um, sort of all being well, if my visa's approved, my wife's from Florida. Hopefully, we're gonna move over there soon, and you know,
Oh, wow.
I was thinking it's the time in my life, you know, where I'm thinking of doing something similar. You know, like opening. There's no music venues in the town, so in her
What
hometown,
town?
so it's Lake City, Florida. It's called. It's kind of maybe like an hour and a half north of, or sorry, west of Jacksonville, maybe 3 hours
Okay.
north of Orlando, that kind of region. So it's kind of North Florida, closer towards Georgia, but um, it's something, you know, I've never actually. Every time I've been over, I've been looking for somewhere, you know, work. If I was living there, where could I play music or work with music? Because
Hmm.
that's what I studied as well. I studied music technology, and kind of came up that if anyone wants to go see music in that area, they got to drive, you know, maybe like an hour to the nearest music venue. So
Yeah.
I kind of relate to the whole thing of just kind of going out and seeing if it works, and trying it out. But for someone kind of going down that same route, then, you know, obviously it must have been a learning experience trying to make that work kind of as a almost like a career for you guys. Um, what so obviously was it able to like pay your bills and those kind of things? Were you having that kind of success when you're on the road, or was it a stressful time where you're like really having to like work hard to make it work?
So yes and yes. It did pay the bills, and it was wildly stressful.
Right.
Um, it's because it's inconsistent, and you don't know, and people mean well, but I find, and this is not just true in the music industry, people just don't keep their word a lot. And so there's a percentage of the commitments that you get financially that are not going to come through. And I've experienced that in the band, which actually prepared me to run my own recording studio and
Right.
work with artists, up both on the label side and independent artists, and then and everything in between, and working with like commercial music supervisors who are making TVs and commercial stuff, to work with all of those people, to walk
Mm.
in with your eyes open and understand X% are of these opportunities are just straight gonna not work out.
Yep.
Being on the road for a long time made you realize that people are just they're gonna be duplicitous, maybe on
Yeah.
accident, maybe on purpose, and you're gonna get a mix of all of that. People who are
Mm.
gonna take advantage of you, people who, you're gonna show up and they forgot that they had a concert booked that day and they haven't been doing promotion for the last 2 months, and
Right. Yeah.
just
I'm
you
sure.
run that whole
Yeah.
gamut.
Yeah, you must
Uh,
want to tear your hair out, just kind of, you know, when people let you down like that. It must be crazy.
yeah. And when people just straight up ignore the contract, and they say, when you say you need a healthy meal, and they just throw some cold pizza your way,
Yeah.
you're going to get that. And if you live on the road, and at that time we were playing a couple hundred shows a year, 190 some, and plus travel days, plus some label days, plus some radio promotion. So there was one day we were on the road like 280 some days.
Wow.
And if you are trusting other people for your food every night, and for them to actually do what you ask them to do.
Yep.
But then you get pizza and lasagna 4 times a week.
Right.
Like,
Yeah, exactly.
It's not a healthy way to live.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's something, the practicalities are maybe something that people don't often think about. You just think it'll be like a glamorous thing. You kind of get on the bus and go on the road, and that's kind of just the way it goes. And the rest is history. But, you know, a lot of that stuff, obviously, like some of your biggest, like some of the things you're thinking about most and working on the most must be the kind of little details in the background that actually make that all happen. So, were you guys doing, like, what kind of music were you making at the time? I guess you're sort of like a rock style band, but what kind of genre of music were you working with?
Indie rock, I would say, was what we started doing. We were influenced early on by Fish and Dave Matthews Band, so we would take like 10-15 minute instrumental pieces.
Yeah.
and nobody told us, hey man, that's not super cool anymore. So we just kept doing it. Yeah. And none of our fans were out there smoking pot, so it wasn't like the right market for that kind of music anyway. But we eventually learned how to condense a song and to deliver something that if we only get 50 minutes with a crowd in a city, we should maximize all of those minutes. So we did still do some instrumental pieces, but we tried to make sure that if we're not going to see these folks for another year, let's give them what they came to see, and have a great time doing that. So it's kind of indie pop rock, I guess, influenced by the Killers and some Radiohead and early like Joshua Tree, U2.
Right. Yeah.
And we love Keane.
Yeah.
And we loved, all of that just definitely spoke heavily into the music. Early Weezer, like the Blue Album, and Pinkerton, and Coldplay, of course, like Viva La Vida era. And so all that spoke into our show, to the way we interacted on stage. And we try to make it a thing that you wanted to, you didn't get it on the record and feel like, oh, I just turn that up at home and I'll be fine.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
You gotta come, you gotta see it happen.
Yeah.
And it was fun.
Yeah. So whenever you guys were, I guess, turning from like just playing because it's fun and because you guys are all brothers and just for the enjoyment of it, when you were going from that into being like a touring band, did you guys have ideas about where you were heading? Were you aiming for the big time, or was it more just the fun of actually being out and doing it as a living?
It's such a strange juxtaposition of it always felt like we're opening for huge bands, and we're stepping on stage in front of, like, there was this one festival in South Dakota, just the neighbor state from us.
Right.
We stepped on stage right before the headliner as the sun was setting on the stage, and there were like 100,000 people.
Wow.
And it's this strange juxtaposition of, man, we're doing exactly what we want to be doing. But then also 10 minutes after you get off stage, you're like, I want to do that again.
Yeah.
It's always just down the block from us. And it's always just, and I don't know if like a band like Coldplay that owns the world, and in the music sense, do they still have that? I don't know. But I hear interviews with Chris, and it seems like he's still there.
Yeah.
Did you watch that documentary about them?
No, was this the Netflix one, was it?
Or I don't know where it came out, but it was great, and it made me feel like as artists we all have that. It's not about like we aren't there if we've done that thing. We have to do the next thing.
Right. It's like a little bit of that imposter syndrome kind of thing, where did you feel like sometimes like you weren't even having the success you were almost, or like you're still something you were striving for beyond where you were?
Yeah. You can't just say that, I'm going to pitch my tent on that record that I made, and then that's where I'm at.
Right.
You got to keep going. You got to
Yeah.
drive. And I think that as creative people, we all are creative. I think we just express it differently. But I think we have to feed that, and the
Mm.
creative um, fruits that we bear come because of the specific. Where do we water? That's where it's going to
Mm.
grow. And I think we have to have the desire to keep watering and to keep getting better. So you ask, like, how would I describe myself? I'm an artist. I'm a creator. Um, I'm a musician, but also I really want to be a learner. And so I sign up for masterclass.com. I don't know if you've
Right.
seen that.
Yeah.
And I just do the subscription every year. So I have I have access to an incredible amount of information from creative people who are doing it for a living. And I can log in and just watch Gordon Ramsay swear
Yeah.
at me and cook. And
Yeah.
it's amazing
Yeah.
because you get like his life failures and lessons in that, and as he's talking to you about how to cook lamb,
Yeah.
and he's and it's great. And then you get like um, Steph Curry teaching how to play basketball.
Yeah, it's
What
it's
I
such an
found,
amazing concept that exists now that you can just like pick the brains of some of like the just the biggest names in all these different disciplines, you know?
it's amazing. And I took acting from Helen Mirren, right? What's so cool is that listening to her talk about becoming a better actor
Mm-hmm.
informed me in an incredibly specific way about how to become a better music producer, how to become a better writer, and just the passion that she brings to it and the attention to detail that she brings to it.
Mm-hmm.
It elevates her craft such that I want to elevate my craft in that same
Right.
way. So even if it's not music production or whatever, I love learning from people that are great at what they do.
Right.
I
It's
think that's maybe why I took up woodworking too a little bit for my kids, because like
yeah.
I just want to learn. I want to like push the boundaries on what I'm capable of.
Yeah, well, I definitely relate to that because I think as creative people sometimes like I think the cross disciplinary thing like really is important sometimes because there are things that are universal and things that you can learn from people in all sorts of different like a musician obviously has a lot in common with a dancer even though they're completely different arts
Mm-hmm.
or you talk about even music conductors have to almost go through lessons of how to move their bodies in certain ways to
Mm-hmm.
represent musical instructions and I guess for me I can definitely relate to that because the masterclass thing even I was considering subscribing myself. I didn't in the end, but like seeing all these different people and even like it's the ones almost that you have least or you think you would have least in common with, or actually
Yeah.
sometimes the ones that seem the most appealing because even like Aaron Sorkin on the screenplay stuff that he was doing, like all that kind of stuff is like definitely um it speaks into your discipline and from a different angle because it's like revealing things that are maybe the first thing that this discipline is thinking of is like something you wouldn't really think of at all, but as soon as you hear it, you think, well, that makes so much sense. So
Yeah.
I definitely get that, as I think for me, I think that would be just like a personality thing in terms of like the creative mind maybe just wants to keep creating and learning in different ways. And maybe it is just something like a personality trait, but is that the way you would see it? Like, do you think everyone kind of has that desire, or is it like a creative person thing, maybe?
I don't know. It's like nature versus nurture. Are some of us already leaning that way, or did some of us get thrust into a path where we had to experience those things? And as soon as we started touring, I think we had to become the kind of people that solved problems creatively.
Hmm.
Um, you blow a tire in the middle of the night in the middle of Utah, and we don't have cell phones yet because it's too
Yeah.
it's not a thing yet.
Right.
And we're literally opening the big map to find out where we are, and we come to a T intersection, and we're supposed to be on a highway that just keeps going.
Yeah.
Like, wait, where are we now?
Yeah, and each turn is like 100-mile turn before you get to the
Yeah,
next one.
it's like go 58.7 miles,
Right.
and then it was MapQuest, like print off the MapQuest directions and then follow them to
Right.
the T. Don't get lost. But then problem solving. It just forces you. How are we going to um, fix these lights to this stand that wasn't made for them, so that our stage show is cool without spending a bunch of extra money on the stand that's supposed to go, that sort of thing, or make our merchandise look cool enough so that people who aren't fans of the band are going to come buy our t-shirts because they just are compelled to by the designs. So all of those problems, we had to chase solutions. And so I had to become like a graphic designer, and which is great because I loved designing and photography and taking pictures of stuff and then making those images cool enough for people to buy. So I think I was thrust into a position where our survival, it wasn't relying on me specifically, but if I didn't do these things, we'd have to go pay somebody to do it. Yeah. And so all four of us took on these unique responsibilities and just made them our own and dove into it and became great at these things that we never wanted to become great at. Yeah. And then once you buy a tour bus, then there's a whole other set of things that just dumped upon you that you have to be good at.
Yeah. Did all that stuff. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Emptying the pee tank in the middle of the night for once.
I didn't even think about the pee tank.
You don't want to be great at that,
Yeah. Did all this stuff, did it feed into your musical excellence, if that's the right word? Did all these different skills and things you were learning, did that affect what you were producing at the end of the day for your fans?
I think so. And I think maybe both ways. I think it made us better creative people. And I think it also stole from our time because music then became the last thing that we could do. So because we're fixing all the cables during the day and trying to troubleshoot the little buzz that's in the system,
right,
we're not writing a cool new song. We're not playing together as four musicians exploring ideas. We did that so infrequently, and I think that was probably part of why relationships started to decline in that situation. The stress of running the business, the amount of people who let us down, all of that stuff just piles up, and then it's not like so an issue like CDs. Let's say at that point people bought CDs. So it's like a little plastic disc with files on it that you put in your computer and it plays the files, right?
Right.
CD.
Yeah. That ancient kind of concept.
It's ancient.
Yeah. Before my time, obviously.
So let's say that I design the CDs and order them to this duplication company, but we're on tour, so they need to arrive in Astoria, Oregon.
Right.
This show that we know we're going to have, they're kind of like a hometown crowd for us. If the CDs don't show up there in time, they're going to show up there maybe the day after we leave.
Yeah.
And then we're shipping them to the next place, but hopefully getting them.
Yeah, maybe chasing your tail.
Chasing it. And so that's going to cost us not only the money to take orders at the show and then ship those to people. So it's a big mistake not getting those CDs to the right spot. And there are a lot of variables outside of our control. So being way ahead of the game to make sure that, and that's one of 100 decisions that happen every single day for a touring artist. And when you're adding all of those things up, it's like this insurmountable thing. If you've dropped the ball, you didn't drop the ball just for you. You dropped it for everybody else in the band and their wives.
Right.
Because we're all surviving on this thing. And it's a big deal. So, and then it's a bigger deal if you don't have grace for each other when you drop the ball.
Right.
And so we got into a very unhealthy pattern of not having grace for each other and being aggressive about failures because we demanded excellence of each other. And I think that's great. There's an element to that that's really healthy. But we were so in it. We were so inside of it. We didn't realize how unhealthy our communication habits had become. Plus, we never got to actually create. It was like the last thing we had to do. Yeah. So, because we're doing all this administrative stuff. So that there is a danger there of, we're talking about creatively expressing yourself in a bunch of different ways. And the danger is spreading yourself too thin and not being great at the thing you really want to do. And I think maybe the music suffered somewhat because of that, which we're now fixing in our later days. My brother and I, no holds barred when it goes to creation. We are making music, and we're letting the path of making explore itself all the way to the end, and we're not stopping it.
Yeah. I
And
mean,
that's exciting.
it sounds almost like, the first metaphor that comes to mind is like, I guess the stereotypical almost loveless marriage where it's like all the little things overpower, the actual core of the marriage. That's kind of what you're
Mhm.
describing, where it's like so many things and like your jobs as busy people doing all these millions of other jobs like overshadow
Mhm.
the purpose of, I guess, why you're all there. Looking back, and I guess almost in a way going forward, what would be your advice to your younger self in terms of keeping the right balance? Or were there some things that were just not as important as you guys made them, or were the things just you could have just lost that and ditched those things and not concentrated as much? Or was that stuff actually, just it had to be dealt with and it had to be looked at, and that's just the way it is?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we lacked systems early on, which would have helped a lot.
Hmm.
Set up a system that almost is a transfer of authority. Um, because we're all four brothers in the band. So there's a lot of tension just because if you're on tour and a thing happens that annoys you during the day,
Yeah.
chances are that thing is going to happen every day and it's going to annoy you every
Yeah.
day.
Right.
um, Chances are that's not just going to fix itself, and the interpersonal issues that arises between two brothers,
Mm-hmm.
it is going to happen every day. And we didn't have the tools relationally to deal with that,
Mm-hmm.
and we didn't have systems in place to alleviate some of that pressure. Um, so a lot of it is just talking about what everyone's expectations are
Mm-hmm.
at the beginning. So if you're having a struggle with your wife, what were your expectations about how this goes? And now I see why it is so hurtful to you, because you expected this and I gave
Mm-hmm.
you this.
Right.
That happened a lot. Everybody had slightly different expectations about how things went. And then as soon as we signed to a record company, brought on in management and booking, so all these other people are speaking into it. We almost kind of expected that's going to alleviate these pressures.
Mm-hmm.
But instead of alleviating the pressure, just everything was bigger. So it was more important.
Mm.
Every photo shoot was more important. Every
Yeah.
design, every chord change, every lyric change, everything was more important now because more people are going to hear it, and
Mm.
there's more pressure on it. And I think we put too much pressure on those things. Um, but at the heart of it, I think it's just um, how do we respond to somebody else's failure,
Mm.
um, or somebody not meeting your expectations? That's where a lot of our struggle came into play, and it ruined us. I quit the band because of it,
Mm.
because I could not bear to create with my brother. We couldn't be in a room alone writing music.
Mm.
It, two guys in a band who can't be alone in a room to write
Yeah.
music for years.
Mm. And
It's crazy.
was that made worse, do you think, because you were family?
I think so. A lot of prejudgment going on. I know what you're going to say about this idea. You already hate it, and I
Mm.
hate it. You haven't even
Right.
said that yet, but I really hate that you hate this idea of mine that I love.
Yeah.
And then even if you just barely confirm that you hate my idea, then yep, I
It
hate
confirms
that.
it all. Yeah.
And now we're mad at each other again because we knew better. We knew I knew that you would respond this
Mm.
way. Um, so we did not treat each other respectfully. And then we'd see other bands like getting in the bus and hugging each other like
Mm.
good morning, my friend. And I'm just like, I don't want to hug my brother in the morning. I'm
Right.
pissed about like 10 things from yesterday.
Yeah. And did there
Those
come?
things piled up.
Yeah. Did there come a point though where I guess the family relationship became something that was almost more important in the band. Is I don't know if that's the reason why it necessarily ended, but I guess looking back, would you or should you have prioritized maybe the family aspect more than the music, if you know what I mean? Like, would you have ended it sooner almost, or left sooner, if it had have kept you guys in a healthier relationship?
Yeah, I think so. It's hard because it was our, it's all that we ever dreamed about, and we had built it.
Hmm.
And when I quit the band, we had people setting up all our stuff for the first time. I would just step out on stage and be handed my guitar that was tuned.
Yeah, that's what you
It's
were
like
striving towards. Yeah.
it's like we worked so hard to get there. Finally, we have two guys that are touring with us. It's their job to do all that stuff. Um, and everything was like the last couple tours we did were just on that front
Mm-hmm.
exactly how we wanted it to be.
Right.
And then on the relationship front, as bad as it possibly could have been as well.
Mm.
So riding that balance between this is really what we want to do, and man, we cannot do this. This is so unhealthy. So to walk away from it at that time, you can imagine, was a pretty huge decision.
Yeah.
And it was earth shattering for all four of us.
It's almost incomprehensible looking in to think, if there's going to be a time where you kind of called it quits, you would think that would be the worst time to do it. But, I guess it just speaks into how the relationships and just the environment can really have an effect. And at the end of the day, with musical pursuits, the chemistry and the dynamic really is paramount almost, because without that the music will suffer. And did you know, you mentioned a little bit before about the music kind of felt like it was declining? Do you think that was the case looking back? Can you like see that happened, that process happened, or
Well,
what do you think?
I don't think it necessarily was declining. I think we just weren't hitting our potential. I think that we didn't write what we could have written. If we had been all collaborating in a healthy way. Things were said that caused people to doubt themselves consistently. Things were said that caused people to wonder if they were even supposed to be a writer, or and then when you're second guessing yourself in that way, everything's coming from your back foot.
Right.
So creatively, you're not expressing what you want to express. You don't feel safe to express that. And so if your creative ideas exist in a space that they might be mocked or brutally dissected, some of that's healthy dissection, but if you didn't feel safe to explore, you're not going to try anymore. Right. And you're not going to put your best foot forward. And so if you're operating creatively out of fear almost, then I don't think you're leaving all of your best work covered. And I think we did that for a long time.
And moving from that to like your own personal kind of ventures and projects, was the reason that you kind of moved on from the band, do you think it was down to the creative aspect, that you weren't expressing yourself as much, or was it just the environment itself and then the relationships turning sour? What was the driver behind, it's an end of one chapter and the beginning of another?
Yeah, it was huge for me. I didn't leave so that I could do whatever I wanted to do creatively. I left because it was an untenable relationship with my brother. And it was a moment that I'll never forget. We packed up into our tour bus and our trailer. My brother Dave had moved from Lincoln, Nebraska to Nashville.
Right.
And I went and I helped him move all of our equipment into his bus and watched him drive away.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, well, that's it. I will never work with that guy again. And that was devastating.
Yeah.
And I didn't do that because I just wanted freedom creatively. I did that because we couldn't handle it as brothers. And so as soon as I got done, I dove headlong into a project that I think just was welling up from a deep place. I needed to say certain things. I needed to explore certain sounds. that I always would hit a wall in creating with, and sometimes in collaboration, you just don't see things the same
Right.
way.
Yeah.
That's fine. But I just felt this freedom to explore, to try stuff. And so I made a record, and it was the first thing I ever really produced.
Mm-hmm.
And I made a lot of mistakes, and I listen to it now, like 10 years later, like I would have done a lot different, but I'm
Right.
so glad I did that because I learned a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad I was bold in these ways, and I'm glad I tried this, and I'm glad I explored that and left it in there. And that was really, really healing process for me creatively. And so a lot of people that come to me and they've been through heartache and grief and they're trying to write about it. I'm like, man, the best thing you can actually do is to make art out of that.
Mm.
Because if I feel that way, if I felt a certain way, if I felt diminished, or if I felt grief, if I felt triumph from a specific situation, and I could translate that into sound, and you hear it, and hopefully it elevates you into the same space that I was in. You didn't go through what I went through, but you
Yeah.
emotionally have,
Right. Yeah.
and hopefully I can give you an outlet for those same things. And so I always encourage writers. Nobody's going to see the world the way you do,
Mm-hmm.
and you have something so unique and special to contribute. And if you don't tell that story, if you don't write that song, if you don't share that melody that's rattling around in your head, no one else is going to. It doesn't
Right.
exist in anyone else's space. So do it,
Did
and
you
do it as
ever? Did you
well
ever?
as you can.
Sorry. Did you ever feel like insecurity about sharing those kind of ideas, or was that always something that came sort of freely, or sort of flowed freely from you to share your work with other people and what you were producing? Because I think for myself, I would have an aspect of like even songwriting and producing stuff. I would feel like I'm not sure if I feel that I want to be that vulnerable and show things to everyone around me. Like what for you, was it always an easy process, or is it still a struggle to kind of be vulnerable in that sense and like just open up and produce things and put them out there?
It's hard every time, especially if it's a really honest, authentic, vulnerable song. Um, and I find the stuff that I'm the most connected to, and oftentimes the people enjoy the most as well, are songs that came from a really honest place, but also that almost just existed.
Mm.
And I just had to uncover it and then just keep finding it. And people talk about like finding a whole verse. It's like, man, that was just there. It was written. And sometimes that happens and it's just amazing. As a writer, you find like oh, where did that come from? It's just there now.
Yeah.
I played the track one time and it's exists in its entirety. And but then sometimes you work on a lyric for like 6 months.
Yeah.
And everything in between, but it's always hard for me. And this is a kind of a passion of mine, is talking to creative people about, so how do you interact with the blank canvas? Right? It's just this Pro Tool session.
Yeah, it's the most daunting part, I think. And even like myself I worked with high school kids doing music production and composition, and it's like people, I guess, just don't know what to do first. Like it's the first step seems to be the one they put the most value on. And I think like for me personally, like the moment that gave me the most freedom was when I realized that like the first thing you write is no more valuable than like the third thing, and just getting things down and then working with them. Then it's like if you go down to the store and like buy a bunch of bricks to build something, it doesn't matter which brick you pick out first, is when you start to assemble them, then you've got something. So like for me, the freedom was whenever I realized that what I put down first may never be used, or it may be the cornerstone of what I'm doing, but like just put stuff down and then like work with it. But some people I think really struggle with just seeing nothingness, and then how do you create something out of that?
Yeah, that's a great analogy, and especially with bricks, because let's say you use that first brick and it is the foundational piece to this wall that you build,
right?
And then you think, wow, this stuff is standing by itself now. Let's get rid of that, and then there's a door there, and that first brick is gone.
Right.
But it led you to this other place creatively. It started it started you on this path that eventually took you to where you ended up with this beautiful doorway.
Right.
And sometimes you need the absence of your original idea to make something really unique.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to, with that blank canvas, I'm trying to overcome that fear that, man, okay, even stacked up against what I did.
Mm.
I did this, and I was traveling on that trip to Ireland.
Right.
Uh, there's a song that, so back up to my relationship with my brother David. Watched him drive away,
Mm.
moved to Nashville. And then I started producing, I started writing my own stuff and made that record. His kids apparently started listening to that record.
Right.
They liked it. And they'd say, play Uncle Phil's stuff.
He's like, turn that off.
Which I think maybe it was a redemptive moment for his kids to start listening. He was like, wait, that was, what, really? He did that? And so I think it surprised him that where I went with music, because we didn't go there together. And so eventually, because of his situation with the label and what he wanted to write songs about, we started talking about what we're listening to again and what we're, music we're loving, and we started talking about that stuff. And eventually, he was like, "Hey, what if I just come up there and you make this next record?" And I was like, "No way! I know we've been in that situation, and we know where it leads, and it's awful." I mean, we've made great music together, but relationally, that could be a very awful. But there was just a glimmer of redemption, a possibility of redemption in it, and hope. Especially because what we're writing about, he's writing songs about freedom. He's writing songs about the oppressed and modern day slavery. More slaves now than there ever have been in the world. And he's writing songs for these little girls and boys that are being taken from their homes in the country and sold for sex by the hour. And he's trying to shine a light on this thing. And none of the labels in town want to touch this. This was years ago. And so eventually I said, yeah, let's do it. And so we started the record, and I'll never forget this moment where the creative process was unlike anything we'd ever done before with producers. It was like, all right, let's plug this into that and just put the bass through that too, and then see what happens. And whoa, don't touch anything. Were you touching that little knob? Don't touch it. Don't touch it. Okay, do it slow. And then it was like, that's so cool. Yeah. Okay, push a chord, get that for sure. And it was like creator himself just walked through the room and touched a few things. And that moment, writing the song is called Commodity off of the first record that we made together after our split. And there's something magical about it. There's a lot of grief and a lot of pain in the sounds themselves, a lot of redemptive notes and some hopefulness, but a lot of longing, a lot of yearning. There's just so much packed into this melody and these sounds. And so we're exploring it in the studio, finish this song, finish the record, find redemption as brothers on behalf of these oppressed people all over the world. And we find hope in it because I saw something unfixable between us that got fixed somehow. Right. In that process. And I don't understand it, but we gave it a chance, and it worked.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of threw that phrase out there like it was almost nothing, or but it's a big thing. You said that you had to reconcile and like redeem your relationship before you could almost go on and think about all the other things that need sort of redeemed and brought to light. And it was like, is that very much something that felt like it had to happen first? Do you feel like you had to restore that relationship almost before everything else? Was that like a priority in the process, or how did you guys approach that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I have no idea. I think it was like, well, let's do it, because I thought maybe we could find redemption together, and we did. Mm-hmm. But was it simultaneous? Was it previous? I have no idea. I think it was at the same time. Right. We're doing. I think as soon as we looked outside of us and thought we're writing for this, but we're doing it together. I think that's maybe where we found something really common, and really like we're suddenly pushing the boat in the same direction together, while respecting each other's skill sets and not trying to infringe on. Like I'm going to respect his songwriting and his lyricism and he's going to respect my writing and my production, and we're going to exalt each other's talents in a way that we never had before. I think maybe that we had in 1996 and
Right.
1990, but we
Well,
hadn't done it for a decade.
like all the junk is was out of the way really when you think about it, from what you described before to this new scenario, it's like, again, it's just two brothers in a room figuring it all out instead of having to think about all the other junk on the side. I think it's clear though that like the impact just of all that other stuff, what it had on you guys as a relationship. It's because clearly there was a yearning, and there always has been, like the spark between you guys. Seemingly, you were always able to have that creative spark and make the music together. But I guess it's the world imposing on you, on the relationship, and on everything that really made it suffer. But I mean, it's amazing to hear how, just by being in the room together and just seeing what happened, that you were able to not only make amazing work, but just, it was a walking through restoring that relationship. And yeah, it's amazing to hear that.
Yeah, it was incredible. And then to know that song, and it was something we did totally independently. And then it went on the radio, and I was on a trip in Ireland,
Mm-hmm.
and then Scotland next.
Right.
And it was just hitting #1, and it was being played on the radio in Scotland.
Wow.
Which was so cool. The knowledge that we did that ourselves. We didn't have this huge label behind us, and we made it in my little recording studio here in Nebraska, and it's getting played all the way over there.
Yeah.
This is a really cool thing, and
Yeah.
and it brought into very clear focus for me the power of redemption.
Absolutely.
When you allow redemption in the relationship, the ripples that it can affect. And now we're 3 records deep writing about trafficking and freedom. And I don't know what the number is today, but every couple days I get a text from the Exodus Road, who's the organization we partner with.
Right.
Thank you so much for rescue 7 girls free in India. Thank you so much for rescue 2 boys, 3 girls free in whatever places, and it's just like, and I'm not taking credit for that. The Exodus Road was going to be doing that no matter what, but hopefully we've brought the people that care about what we're doing, we bring them to the table and say, we also really care about this, and we want to make a difference for these kids, and you can help out in these ways. And so to see the Remedy Drive Nation come behind and say, yeah, we're into this too. We want freedom. And now we're 3 records deep,
right?
And we're still going.
Awesome. And you mentioned a little earlier, actually, as one of your influences, you mentioned U2, and it got me thinking, they're a band that clearly has things to say, obviously, about the world and the way they see it. And I guess it got me thinking, even spiritually and stuff, what was, I guess, was there always something you were working towards with your music, or something you were trying to say? And, especially on the spiritual front, I guess, a lot of that music was, definitely deeply spiritual and religious and way, all that stuff. What impact did that all have in what you were doing? Like, was it almost was there an ideology almost behind the music that was being made? It's hard, I guess it's hard to describe, but, when you think of a band like U2, they've always got something to say about the world and about the injustices and things that they're saying. Is that something that you guys resonate with?
Hugely, man. I love almost every time Bono opens his mouth, he's saying something that is important because it's relevant. And he doesn't just go and put on his show. He goes and puts on his show, and it's a spiritual experience. And he's going to put up the names of the people that were impacted by some disaster that week on the
right.
He's going to be right there talking about whatever's happening. It seems like he has his finger on the pulse of what's important to oppressed people, I think, or people in need.
Yeah.
Because there's so many needs, and that's we care with the Exodus Road. We care about a very specific segment of the people with need, and because that's what we've been exposed to. That's what Matt Parker, who started the Exodus Road, had some incredible conversations with Dave to bring Dave into a space where he can write songs about it, and then actually go and be a part of the redemption for these little boys and girls all over the world now, mainly Southeast Asia and South America. So David's part of these, and I went for 10 nights with him as well. But he's part of these regular deployments where he goes into these places with undercover spy gear and having conversations with the people selling these girls and boys by the hour, and really soul-sucking, awful, terrible work. And he does it because he's writing about it, he's singing about it, and he doesn't want to just write about it and sing about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I see Bono in a similar way. Those minds have definitely impacted the way we think about music, the way we think about philosophy, art, and religion, of course. And I'm on a journey. I don't know. Like we grew up in a pretty conservative, fundamentalist Christian environment, which we took Scripture very seriously, and it meant what it said it meant. And the King James was the best version of what it meant,
Yeah.
And now I come to that and I wonder, well, who was that written to? What did it mean to them? Not who wrote it. I mean, also who wrote it, but not only who wrote it, but also who was the audience of that, and how did they absorb that information in their culture?
In terms of the original scripture, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did they receive it, and how did it impact their lives? And that now, like thousands and thousands of years later, in some cases, some scriptures so old, like what does that mean for me in my language, in my culture, in my time? So even just listening to people like Bono talk about that, or the Dalai Lama met with the Bishop of South Africa, and they wrote a book together called the Book of Joy. Have you ever heard about this book?
I don't think I have. I think I knew they met, but I didn't know about the book.
They're both like 80, and it was somebody's birthday, and Desmond Tutu and the Dalai Lama.
Yeah.
And it's this beautiful conversation about this guy asked thousands of people, what does joy mean to you? And what questions do you have about it? What do you want the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu how do you want them to respond? How do you want them to talk about these things? And so he asked them all these questions, and then he wrote a book giving all of their answers. And hearing these two ancient, these two guys talk about ancient philosophy and theology as it pertains to the joy that they have, it was amazing. And it definitely influenced me in the way that I think about how do I interact with the planet? How do I interact with art? What do I want my impact to be? So I would love to learn from more people like that. But where else were we talking about? We're talking about Bono. We're talking.
Yeah, I guess naturally coming on from this, you mentioned about growing up in a conservative, Christian household. What impact did that faith have, I guess, on the music that you guys produced? And I guess obviously a lot of it's very obvious the impact faith did have on your music, but do you feel like you would have still been doing music as a pursuit if it wasn't for that, or was that maybe the inspiration towards what you guys were doing and saying?
Yeah, it's hard to put a dynamic or put a quality on how much faith has impacted every of my life, and how that faith has been shifting according to what I'm reading, or there's that core faith that I grew up knowing these truths. But we had some things in our church, like we didn't have instruments
right
in church because there was a lack of instruments in the New Testament, a very clear lack. And so we took that as a pattern to say, well, God doesn't want you to have instruments in church.
Right. Yeah.
So starting a rock band in that scenario was
a big departure.
it was like a huge departure from that, and we're going against the flow, and our dad took a lot of heat for it, but we did it, and eventually it was going to become this huge problem. But so how did that impact the way I write music? Just even the fact that I'm playing an instrument on stage is in direct contradiction to how we interpreted scripture as children.
Right. Yeah.
That's a weird juxtaposition. But our parents were so supportive, and so my relationship with faith has obviously had to address that.
Right.
What do
Yeah.
I think about the way scripture interacts with instruments in the church?
Yeah.
And obviously I'm using that as a metaphor.
Yeah, no, it's so interesting though to hear you say that, because I mean, I guess you naturally assume that their, music and faith are all so linked, and I guess so many people get their start in the industry by, what they do in churches and how they start to
Yeah.
pick up instruments and stuff. But it's actually really interesting to hear that, actually doing the music was almost you reevaluating what you knew from what you've been taught. Really, it was a learning process, to get past that almost and reconcile that.
And we could play music outside the church. We could play at high school, but not for a church service. Not where it belonged. And then so that was so that kind of opened this door. Well, what else am I accepting as God-given truth,
right,
from scripture that has been interpreted a certain way, that's impacting the way I think about God himself? And so my journey has taken me into a place where I really want to know the creator of the heavens and the earth. This God who designed me as a creative person. I think we all are. We're creative people. We're designed in the image of our creator. And he made stuff out of nothing. He just made stuff. So if we're made in his image, how are we best representing who he is? I think partly by making excellent work, by inventing interesting ideas and thoughts and music and photography and film and art. We are best representing who he is if we're doing that beautifully and accurately and honestly. I'm reading a book right now from, it's called Art and Faith, or Faith and Art, I can't remember which, A Theology of Making. And it was written by this guy who he's Fujimura. He's I'm not sure I'm saying that right, but he's a painter, and he does slow painting. So he grinds his own pigments. Everything in his process takes a long time. And he coats we're talking about the blank canvas. He coats his canvas with 70 layers before he starts painting.
Wow.
So this guy takes his time, and the process informs him and his life is like that too. It's very meditative and thoughtful, and his faith and his art are so mixed. And so when he says we were created in the image of God, the creator, it bears a lot of weight, because he spent so much of his time creating in a slow and thoughtful and methodical way. How can I be more like that in what I'm doing? I don't know. And I'm just kind of running with some other thoughts here, obviously, but so being and he's a Christian painter, but he also is trained in this ancient art of Matsuki, I think it's called, where you break a teacup and you mend it with gold. So it's broken, and maybe in ancient Japan, this teacup would sit around for generations and would get passed broken to the next generation before they would bring in a master kintsugi artist.
I've never heard of that.
And then he would mend it with gold and some gluing technique. And he doesn't try to hide the seams, so you can see the gold seams. So it becomes more beautiful and more valuable. Because of the gold. It's on purpose. So what a beautiful metaphor for mending broken things and making them better than they were. What a beautiful metaphor for redemption.
Absolutely.
Listening to that guy who's talking about art, it informs what I do as a producer. What do I do as a father, trying to mend my, when my kid gets hurt? How do I encourage her to be better than she was before that? What did she learn? I don't know. There's a lot.
There. No, and having this faith obviously in the music industry, the way you're working, obviously that must be in some cases you would think, there's natural conflicts and there's ways in which it can be a dark industry, even from what I've seen. I'm only young myself, but from even dipping my toe in the music industry, obviously it can be a dark place. Have you experienced that yourself, and how's it been for you as someone, obviously, in the music industry, as someone seeking to know God more?
Yeah, that's hard because the kind of person I want to be is the person that believes the best about people. And we did consistently run into things in the music industry
Mm-hmm.
that were hard to see past, to see the human being behind that decision, especially when it affected our income, when it affected us being 2,500 miles from home with nowhere to stay,
Right.
sleeping on a stage somewhere with no sleeping bags and like
Yeah.
with our wives,
Mm-hmm.
that was, I wasn't married at the time, but my brothers were, and it's hard to see past that decision, um, and see the person that made that decision.
Yeah.
So when I look at the music industry, it's basically just comprised of a bunch of people, human beings that are making decisions. And a lot of those decisions are based on fear of losing their position or losing their job in that industry.
Yeah.
At the time we signed to a major record label, radio was such a huge deal. And I think somebody at the label slipped up and said, well, your target market's the 55-year-old women. We were like, huh?
Right.
It's not who comes to most of our concerts. So I don't know
Yeah.
where you've been, but that's who buys the CDs. And in the Christian music industry, that is, so now it's a 65-year, or I think it's a 60-year-old woman is the average K-Love, like biggest um, airplay in America.
Right.
60-year-old woman. And that's not necessarily the people that I connect with the most on music, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So you, when you talk about the industry, it's just a bunch of people that are
Yeah.
making those decisions, and they're making them based on what they think the next person is going to allow. So the radio DJ has an idea about what his listeners want.
Yeah.
And then the radio programmer at the label, or the radio's, the guy who works at the label in the radio department, that his job is to call that radio DJ
Mm-hmm.
to pitch
And
the
make
songs.
the match. Yeah.
He has an idea about what that guy's going to like, about what that guy's going to think the people like. And so then by the time it gets to us, it's so far removed from
Yeah.
me playing a song for you,
Right. Yeah.
which is why I've kind of decided in my world, and this is what I always encourage my artists to do. Don't think about, don't even consider who you're writing this music for. Write what you need to write what you are compelled to write, and make it the best you can. And then when it goes out in the world, it's going to connect with the people that need to hear it. And it's going to draw, it's going to be like a magnet to draw. And then the people that hate it are going to hate it. And hopefully they really hate it because you've made something so incredible,
Yeah. Right.
So,
I mean, what you're saying here, it actually reminds me, I don't know if you've read the book yet, but Matthew McConaughey's new book, Green Lights, you should definitely check it out, because he talks about a very similar experience where being an actor and going for auditions, and then, 1 minute you've got this part and then something happens and then you've lost the part. And he said, it took him a while to see when people said, it's not personal, it's just business. It actually took him a while to actually see that as the truth, because it got to the stage where he had to assume that of people, that they were gonna almost let him down because it's just business, and that's okay, that's the way it was. So it's interesting to hear your insights in that, because it's obviously a similar situation where you're kind of relying on other people, and you mentioned earlier about even your income being reliant on other people. And yeah, I just thought that was a really good book, especially explaining someone navigating this, the acting industry and movie industry. But in some ways, I guess they're they're pretty similar. They're both creative type industries, and there's so many people and so many opinions and so many factors and what people are pitching and producing and making. And even you mentioned about the ideas and no labels wanting it. Like it's the same as going for an interview and no one wanting to have you in a film. So yeah, I think you should definitely check that book out. It's really
Yeah,
interesting.
I
But
want to read it for sure.
and again, as someone who Matthew McConaughey identifies himself, he's a Christian himself, and it's interesting to hear his perspective because it's so vastly different to pretty much anyone else I've ever heard. It's a very interesting read. But seeing as you give me a book recommendation there, I thought I would fire one back at you.
Yeah,
But
that's great.
it's just interesting to hear the similarities, between what you guys are saying. It's just, it must be hard not to take it personally when someone lets you down or someone doesn't get what you're after, like you said.
Yeah, and then also not to be really quick to share that experience. So what I was just talking to a friend of mine who runs a taco slash coffee shop a couple doors down here from the studio,
Mm-hmm.
and he wants to start a podcast. I have a podcast studio here, and he's like, but I can't talk about food because a lot of my friends run businesses around here, and if I go down the street and I say, oh, their salad was awful and it came out late,
Right.
because we love to share negative experiences.
Yeah.
I think we're like 8 or 10 times more likely to share a negative experience than we are a positive one, because it's more salacious. It's like it's
Yeah.
noteworthy and newsy.
Well, it's just like how news makes its money off giving you stuff
Yeah.
that you're outraged over.
So and back to masterclass. So you learn a lot about the kind of person you want to become watching these creatives talk about their field.
Mm-hmm.
And there have been a couple, and I won't name names, but there have been a couple that I thought I just never want to be that guy. The
Right.
way he talks about other creatives is so negative. He just looks down on other processes. He thinks his process is the only process and everything else is wrong. And he's baffled. How would someone else do it this way? And I think about that and I'm like, man, that gave me a great picture of how I don't want to talk
Right.
about other
Yeah.
people. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it's so easy to get sucked into the negativity, and it's yeah, like you said, it must be difficult, especially in an industry where you're competing and you are critiquing and trying to strive for success. And I guess naturally it seems like a zero sum game in your head a little bit, where you think, if I'm being successful, that means someone else has to not be as successful. I got to take some of their share, but I guess it's not always that way.
The pie is much bigger than that.
Yeah.
We put so much arrogance on ourselves to think that we're gonna steal from somebody else's, or that we deserve more or whatever. It was interesting talking to Kyle when he was coming here.
Mm-hmm.
Even in the process leading up to him flying here and putting out his Kickstarter, because that's a huge thing,
Yeah.
You telling the world, I'm about to do something, not like I already did, but I'm about to do something creative. And it's almost like you got to hold me accountable to it. Also, do you want to help me with this? Do you want to help me with this? So it's a huge thing. And I did one for my solo project too. And it takes this incredible leap of like vulnerability to share that with the world. And I remember in conversation with him, I was shocked. And I think it may be an Irish thing that some people almost hoped he didn't make it.
Maybe,
there's something about that. It's so ugly and it's so human. Like, oh, he's trying to do that. Well, good luck. He'll never do that.
Yeah.
And then he did. He went and did it, And it's really incredible to watch people chase their dreams and to chase something that's difficult, a path that's hard, and to actually do it and to be successful and find something unique in it. So I'm always encouraging people that way, and I'm always trying to challenge myself to do that too, and not to say, not to look at the other guy and say, oh, he's not going to do it, man.
Yeah.
To be encouraging, and instead of always poking holes. And I think I could write a book about the Christian music industry and how awful it can be.
Wow.
And about how depressing it is to go on stage and sing about the things we're singing about. but then some of the conversations that we had with executive or people that lived in that world,
Yeah, it's crazy.
it just felt like, man, what are you doing? What are you doing in this? Why don't you just
Yeah.
sell other music? Why do you have to sell Christian music if you think that way? But I think a lot of people just really believe in it. All that to say, um, I think it's important for me not to dwell on those things. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
And to be grateful that the journey that has brought me here, as difficult as it was, however many blown tires and 360-degree spins on the interstate, and canceled shows, and
Yeah.
then canceled bands that didn't come to the studio the day they were supposed to come.
Wow.
And they
Yeah.
came and didn't bring their money. Then they broke up almost like when I was mixing the record. All all
Yeah.
of that stuff has brought me to who I am today. And so in many ways, I have to look back and be grateful for it and say, I'm glad that I went through that stuff, because I think that formed me creatively into a rounder, fuller sense of, there's emotional attachment to sounds now that I have that I wouldn't have
Yeah.
if I hadn't gone through some of that stuff.
Right, yeah. I'm so glad you brought it back to the some of those crazy moments, because I just wanted to finish off by actually asking you like some of your favorite stories, maybe of being on the road, being in the music industry, just all that stuff. What are some of the, like, give us some interesting stories or fun stories or even scary stories, of what life was like on the road in a band.
Um, a lot of the scariest stories have to do with us spinning on the freeway.
I wouldn't have assumed that would be a major issue for a band on the road, to be honest.
I mean, I don't know how many miles. It's probably approaching 1 million miles that I've driven.
Yeah.
Um, and being in the car for that long, your chances of being in a wreck are so
Right.
much higher. So, and especially when you can't afford the appropriate vehicle to pull the trailer that you have, and the trailer is this big and your car is this big,
Yeah.
like this pulling it, that
Yeah.
the moment where your trailer starts to go.
Oh no.
Have you ever had that experience?
I have been in the car, I think, with when the trailer starts to have a little shimmy, but actually I haven't done much towing myself, so
It's
yeah.
it's like you're on a roller coaster a little bit,
Right.
like that feeling of, oh, but without the knowledge that a couple thousand people an hour do this.
Right. Yeah.
This, and they walk out on the other
Yeah,
side.
no guarantees.
There's no guarantees that this wobbling trailer is going to work itself out.
Oh man.
And yeah, we had just the amount of times that we had those situations was, I just hated it. And winter
Yeah.
driving, when you driving situations were the scariest stuff for sure. We didn't play a lot of crazy clubs where, we played a lot of churches, and then we played a lot of like festivals and
Yeah.
arenas and stuff. But
I guess what's the one that stands out, maybe, or is there a memorable one that just like a moment that tops the others in terms of just will stick with you forever?
Well, maybe this is a little bit off topic, but there is one moment that I had. So I grew up listening to the Newsboys. You familiar with the Newsboys?
Yeah, yeah.
But we're talking about like John James was in the band, and then
Right.
Furler was in the band. Like
Early days.
Yeah, loved that era. And then Take Me to Your Leader, and I was like, and then Entertaining Angels.
Right.
So Phil Joel sang that one, right? So I grew up loving that song, and we couldn't listen to rock music too loud in the house. So I would listen to it, like put my ear next to the speaker at night.
Yeah.
Listen to, like, I don't know how old I was, just a teenager, just being inspired by this music. And the first, I think maybe the first big show we went to was an Audio Adrenaline Newsboys show. So much so that when Audio Adrenaline got done, my little brother Paul was like, I didn't recognize any of those songs, because he thought it was the Newsboys already.
Right.
Like, no, that's just the first one. There's still coming. So anyway, fast forward a few years and
Mm-hmm.
um, get to meet those guys and like love those guys. And then eventually, after I started producing, I wrote this track that it was an old hymn, and then we wrote verses to it, and I played it for some reason. Phil Joel was in town here, and
Mm.
played it for him. Just loved it. He's like, "Hey man, can I sing on that?" And so I sent him in the vocal booth, and the surreal moment, like the 15-year-old me listening
Yeah.
to him sing "Entertaining Angels," and the 30-something-year-old me
Mm-hmm.
pressing record on that vocal. It was this unbelievable
Mm.
uh,
Full circle moment.
full circle, not even full circle. It's like a universal way
Right.
from where I thought it would be.
Yeah, just yeah,
It's like,
just out of body experience.
yeah, and because he's got an incredible there's a special talent on his voice,
Right.
and even just recording his voice, apart from having been like enamored with that song when I was a kid, um, would have been amazing by itself. Plus, like hearing him sing a melody that I wrote
Mm.
it
Amazing.
was like, man, it's worth it to work hard, to go through tough stuff. And it's totally inspiring to work with people that really are passionate about what they're doing.
Mm.
So after he did that, I think I produced a couple songs for him and went to his
Yeah.
house, produced some in his house. And
Yeah.
so there's moments like that where that's the stuff that I really remember
Yeah.
from the past, like
Hmm.
plus all the fights,
Right. Yeah. Of course.
like fighting with my brother uh, before getting on stage. There was
Mm.
one moment where we had a lot of discourse about who was going to stand on the bass drum when um,
Right. Yeah.
during the set.
Yeah.
Everything was so meticulous and
I
calculated.
know. Yeah, it seems trivial now when you look back. I'm sure. Just
So stupid. But so anyway, I had gone up there and I got the bass way up high, and
yeah.
it's a big moment in the show.
Yeah.
And he had taken the mic off and was singing. He didn't have his guitar or whatever. And I'm positive he saw me up there.
Right.
But he came sprinting, and there was this huge collision, and cymbals and toms were knocked over. And the
This
song
during the show.
this was during the show, during
Yeah.
the big part of the show.
Wow.
And then he just straight up left the stage because he got hurt.
Oh man.
And it was like a picture of our low moment.
Yeah.
Because it was like a stupid little detail that we were fighting about, and I think maybe this whole thing was like happened because it had been brought up so many times.
Right. Yeah.
So he
I mean, it reminds me of the stories of Oasis breaking up, and I don't know if
yeah,
you're familiar with that, but like the Gallagher's swinging the guitar
great.
at each other and stuff.
I mean, it's not as good as that because he didn't then come out on stage and heckle us.
Right.
He didn't come out in the crowd and say, "You suck,"
Yeah.
which is what those guys did to each other.
That's well. I mean, it's been a great conversation, and it's been great to talk to you about this stuff, and obviously, looking back, it's amazing that you guys are now where you are and able to work and make the music you are making, because obviously it's an important message, and I think the fact that you guys are at a place where you're able to make that now obviously says something about both your resolve to make that, to make it work and get through it, but also I guess just it's a metaphor for like the redeeming nature of faith, and just things that are broken being made new, and then you working towards the important stuff that you're making. So yeah, I think it's just been awesome to talk to you about all that stuff, and I really appreciate you coming on the show. So yeah, thanks so much. And
I love your conversation. I love your insight on stuff.
was,
I'm definitely going to read Matthew McConaughey's book.
it's so well. I would recommend the audiobook.
Yeah,
I don't know how big an audiobook guy you are, but
love it.
something special listening to him saying the words, because you hear like every little inflection of just him telling you about his life. It's just some of the most funny stories, but some of the most I guess it's amazing spiritual insight as well, and just lots of bits of wisdom, because he says it in such a way that's like it's like you're just talking to him over a campfire, or like down at the, just hanging out down the pub,
Yeah.
as you would, just sitting talking to someone. But there's actually a lot of depth in the little nuggets that he throws out. He calls them bumper sticker moments, where he says like something that's short and concise but has a lot of depth to it. So
Hmm.
definitely would recommend that to anyone listening. Check out Green Lights, Matthew McConaughey. It's on Audible, I believe, and I don't know if there's any other places that do audiobooks that are mainstream, but that's where I got it, and it's a great
We
listen.
do
But
we do Libby here in the States, which is
right,
like if you have access to the library, if you have a library card, basically, then you
right,
have access to all the audiobooks. And so we
mm,
listen to a, a Life in Parts by Bryan Cranston,
right.
Walter White guy,
Yeah, yeah. Well,
and
I know him as Malcolm in the Middle guy.
yeah, Malcolm in the Middle guy.
Yeah.
He has chapters. Every chapter is a different character that he played.
Hmm.
Um, Walter White and Malcolm in the Middle's dad, and but even just as son and father and husband. And so he has all these life in parts. It's really good. But hearing him, he does the same thing. He talks about his life and he reads it to you, and so you really get to
Yeah.
like you hear him.
I've never really, like, when I was younger, I was a huge book guy. Like, I couldn't get enough. But then, I guess as the tech era kind of came up, and like YouTube, that sort of took over, because it's like, I guess it's another level of engaging because you're listening and watching, and then
Yeah,
but just discovering audiobooks. For me, I just sit and, like, I'll play a video game or something, but listen in the background. So it's kind of like I've something to do. I'm fiddling and playing something, but also kind of absorbing, and just, I think discovering audiobooks has been a really big thing for me, because I guess I never would have sat down intentionally with a book and just leafed through it, because I'm just that, um I don't know what the word is. I just like to be active. I'm just an active
uh,
person, so it's a struggle to sit, and I guess the Bible's pretty much the only book that I'll sit and read. Just, a book in my hand. But yeah, audiobooks just has been such a big discovery. But um yeah, you should start a book club and talk about all this stuff for sure. I'd
you.
listen to that.
So here's a question though. Do you when you tell people you do you say you read Matthew McConaughey's book, or you say you listened to it? How do you? Because I
I
think
would,
you did. You
yeah.
read it, like, but it just means that you consumed the information.
Well, here's the
What's
weird
your stance on
thing.
that?
Yeah, well, the weird thing is that my wife laughs at me for this, but I will listen to the book and then proceed to go and buy the book as a physical paper copy so I can
Huh.
stick it in my library. So
So
I don't know.
you're gone deeper.
Yeah,
You're
well,
like, read this one? Yeah.
do
Hey,
you know
right
what,
here.
well, do you know what it's like? It's like listening to someone on Spotify and then buying the LP. It's like,
Yeah.
the actual vinyl cover. It's,
Wow.
I don't know. Maybe I like being able to have the book. Like, I like the thought of having a distinguished library full of great thinkers. But then, practically the way it just works for me is listening to it. So then it's kind of like I have that. I've supported the artist almost by buying their book
I
and
love
having
that.
it, and being able to leaf through it if I want to. But I just know practically, like, I'll never find the time to sit and read it. So, like, if I'm sitting in the office or something, I'll stick something in my ears, because it just helps me to actually focus on work. Like, I can't sit and be engaged with work because it's boring, and I'll put something in my ears and then I can kind of battle through it. But yeah, I get laughed at a little bit, because it's like, why buy it once you've listened to it? But I don't know,
The
there's something
support,
special
yeah.
about the support, and having it physically, and just,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like, there's been so many books that I've bought, and this is like a small section, just where I can't see where my thumb's pointing
Yeah.
behind me here in the corner. There's a small section of books that I have, and most of them I've just never listened to, or read. Sorry. So I feel like now I'm starting to make some process, and I found a way, like a rhythm that works for getting some of the knowledge out of them, and the wisdom that's like sitting present on my shelves, that I've just never found a way to engage with. So I don't know. I would say I probably tell people that I've read the book, but really it's more close to I've had the book read to me.
Yeah.
It's like, it's just a different way of processing it. But I guess as long as I have the wisdom and the insight of the book, then I'm not picky about what way I consume it.
And I think you can say you've read it. I mean,
Yeah, I
you
would I would
read that
say
book.
it.
That just means that you consumed that information, in my opinion.
Yeah,
But here's another question for you.
go
So
ahead.
my this so I rent. I have a lot of space up here, and I rent a bunch of these other rooms out to other producers.
Hmm.
And one of the producers, a couple doors down, he's into Bitcoin and stuff, and he was
Yeah.
saying, he's saying you should invest right now because it's going to be huge in the next
Right.
quarter. Okay. Um, but then we got onto this conversation of I don't know what it's called, like Bitcoin. You know, Bitcoin's like the digital version of money,
Yeah,
right?
like
What's it?
cryptocurrency.
It's like a currency that doesn't exist in physically,
Yeah.
like
Hmm.
we're talking about. But then there's art. There's like crypto art, right? Have you
Right.
heard about this?
No, is this like do you mean like art that's like computerized or on the internet, or what do you mean by that
It's
specifically?
like literally crypto art where you can't, um, there is no physical representation of it, and people are buying it and trading it like an artifact, like a Mona
Yeah.
Lisa or something. And so it has.
Are they engaging with the art when they do this, or is it
It's
purely to,
fun.
to
I
trade
think
the
people
art?
are just trading it. And
Wow.
maybe there's some people who are, but it's intentionally made to be very digitally, like bit mappy.
Yeah. Right.
Um, what do you think about that? I mean, it's like it's challenging the perception of what art is, which is interesting. Uh, do you have to hold it? Do you have to be in front of it? One thing
Yeah.
that
No, sorry. Go ahead. I'll let you finish
this
there.
this guy, this Japanese painter, Makoto Fujimura is his name, I think. But that wrote this book that I'm reading. He People say that you don't understand his paintings until you've sat in front of them for 10 minutes. And then after 10 minutes, it's like this emotional realization of what he's creating. So can crypto art give you that? I don't think so.
Yeah,
So
it's to me. Well, to me, part of the intrinsic, and I guess this has been challenged in recent years, but part of the intrinsic value of art is the fact that it holds its value because of the mastery that went into creating it, and the time and effort, and the fact that you can, I guess, very objectively appreciate its value in terms of the what went into creating it. It's subjective in terms of how much you like it or value it in that way, but like the Mona Lisa will never lose its value because of its importance as something that was like a work of a master artist. And
mhm.
I guess we've seen these days a lot of art that is, and like I discovered a lot of this even in the music stuff going through university and learning that kind of thing. But um, there's a lot of art that the intention isn't always to be masterful, but to be thought provoking. So there's another element of that, where art can be like just colors kind of every like smeared all together, and it's saying something beyond. It's nothing to do with the technique of it, but it's to do with the what it's saying. So that you've got that element, but then it seems like a bridge too far for it to exist in a its only paradigm for existing really is that it holds value. I guess that's what you're saying, that it's traded based on the fact that it has a value rather than it having value because of it the way it was created or something like that. So it seems like a weird concept to have. I guess it's like saying you have a drawing of a like a priceless Ming Dynasty ceramic piece, and it's trying to assign a value to that because just arbitrarily. So I don't know how I feel about that. It seems like a very strange concept, to
It
be
is a
honest.
weird
But
concept. Me too. But I'm trying to wrap my head around, like, so the guy that went out and bought the LP and played it on his record player until it didn't work anymore. That guy, fast forward 30 years, 40 years, and he just gets emailed an MP3 and he's like, and he listened to the whole album front to back, all 12 songs. He had to flip it over halfway through. He cranked it up on his floor speakers. That guy, fast forward to him getting an MP3 and listening to it on the speakers on his cell phone. Like his experience with the art now, is it is he appreciating the art the same as he was then? And how do we interact with art, and how do we consume it a lot quicker?
yeah, well, it's
Like,
art the experience versus art the consumable. Like you said, it's I guess Spotify makes it very easy and things like that to go through a lot of music, and I guess they get put into playlists by computers and things like that, and you just kind of it's background noise. And I think a lot of the art of the album has been lost because of that.
it's
Because
all singles and it's all skipped into
yeah,
the
and it
playlist.
gets literally there's a whole I guess genre or business of making music that fits into Spotify playlists, and that makes them money through that. You know, obviously you'd be familiar with all that, but it's um yeah, the art is an intentional creation. I think has suffered in some way because of that, because it the limitations of the act of playing something on vinyl forces you to act in an intentional manner. You know, you have to set it up. You have to sit and listen in a certain vicinity. You can't go on a walk and have it in your ears unless you stream it somehow.
Yeah.
But you know, you have to sit with the cover art in front of you and the credits, and you flip the thing halfway through, and you have to assign some time. So, there's definitely there. I mean, it's definitely a different. Like you can't. I don't think you can engage quite as intentionally just by having it in the background or something like that. But I'm
Yeah.
speaking though from someone who got their musical intro and background from like an iPod Classic. I discovered Oasis through an iPod. That was my intro to music, and then from then, going and for any government people listening, I acquired it very legally. But getting the MP3s of all these other bands, just downloading them in bulk, like the Smiths and then the Jam and the Who and all these art, sticking them on an iPod and then having this library of stuff. It
Yeah.
definitely gave me something. There was something to that, to having it and listening intentionally still, but having it all at my fingertips where I could get a huge depth without having to have a huge financial outlay. So there's pros and cons, but I think it's hard to communicate the heart that you want the listener to have when they're listening to it and consuming it. Like you can't force someone to sit down and listen to something unless you go and physically strap them down, but someone has to almost desire to discover the wisdom
Yeah.
of the book, or the what the music is saying to them, or the value. And like if you go and listen to, like, this is maybe some of the purity of classical music comes from the fact that you need to assemble 100 people to listen to it, and up until I guess the last 100 years or whatever, when there's recordings, like you physically had to go and listen to people creating the music.
Hmm.
And
That's such a
it's
cool
yeah,
thought.
it's just I guess it's, I don't know going forward how people will deal with that, but people, I mean, people find a way. If they want to seek it, they will find it. And even cassette tapes are making a bit of a comeback because people want to have something portable that's also physical.
Yeah.
It's just people will find a way to do it. But I think the majority of music these days is designed to, like, it's a business. It's designed to play on the radio, and people will listen, like it enough to go to a concert. But I mean, yeah, people find a way, I think, if they want to discover it.
So what's your I mean, I love all of that because I think people do. And I think it's important for us to as creative people to know that when I write this record and I intend you to listen to it as an album, I
Yeah.
want you to sit down and listen to this whole album. These songs aren't just singles that I wrote over the last 2 years and they're all in the same space.
Yeah.
These exist together.
Mm-hmm.
But it's important for us, I think, as artists to know that people are not going to have that experience. And we give them our best version of what we can give them and let them interact with it however they want to.
Mm.
We encourage them, obviously, to do it the way we intended
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Like this guy's paintings, he encourages you to sit there for 10 minutes because that's
Mm-hmm.
the best way for you to experience his paint, his art. So
I mean,
for you, like, what's your primary, like, you play music, right?
yeah, yeah. So um, I started off with piano. That was my introduction, sort of doing piano lessons, and then from there picked up a guitar because I liked Oasis. Started playing in church, and then all of a sudden there was no basses, so then I had to pick up the bass and play that, and that was kind of, I just started off just through necessity, kind of learning and figuring things out. But then, I started to see it. Start to discover the heart and the soul behind music a lot more, I think, growing up, and then going to university and exploring that more. I've sort of decided that I'm kind of want to head more in the direction of both music, the record, like you said, the concept, almost giving
Mhm.
someone something that they can treasure. So that appeals to me, and also the event appeals to me as well. So those, I guess, experience is kind of the common denominator there. But I always thought maybe I love computer stuff and tinkering with that, and I love playing music, but I always thought I'd be more interested in the physical dealing with the Pro Tools stuff and kind of playing around with settings and compressors, limiter, all that stuff. But actually, the more I've actually been involved in music, the more I think I have more of a passion for how how the experience then translates to the listener and the people that attend the gigs, or all that stuff. So um like I mentioned earlier about the music venue, I think I don't think it's healthy to have a community where people can't go and intentionally listen to music. In some ways, it's maybe that's just me, some people might not value it as much, but I think people miss out from always consuming their music behind a screen, or
Yeah,
something in that regard. So I guess that, just because I guess I was inspired by seeing people play and be passionate about it, I think I just have a I want to translate that and pass it on to other people.
that's great, man.
I don't know if there was a question you were going to ask about that
No,
necessarily,
that's
but I guess that's my my where I come into the music side of things, and what I'm passionate about.
yeah, that's great, and I think that's kind of where I was going. What's your where do you plan to express, you know, this
Yeah,
desire? Um, and that's the venue. That's gonna be great. Plus,
that's
you're
what
already
I'm
doing
aiming
it
towards.
here.
What's that? Sorry.
So plus you're doing it here on the podcast. You're
Yeah.
exploring these ideas and helping people think through
Well,
these
the
thoughts.
podcast thing, that was very much. I mean, it's passion as well, but necessity and seeing a need, and you can maybe relate to this. But I think people need to be able to talk better, process ideas better, learn from others' experiences better. It's very difficult these days to break the cycle of just being fed what you want to be fed, or like things, social media and YouTube and all these providers just push things at you that they know you'll like. So it's important, I think, to have these conversations where you can also, yes, you can understand more about what you believe, but then understand why people believe the opposite, and then have those conversations in healthier ways. So I mean, that's why I started the show, just because I saw too many Facebook arguments where people weren't really wanting to learn. They were just looking to put their own opinions over on impose them on the other person. So yeah, that's it. I mean, that's more of a, well, not more of, but I guess it seems like it's more of a spiritual exercise. But I mean, music is as well. But like I would seek for my venue to be a light in the music industry, just as you probably would see your studio likewise. It can be, I don't want it to be a place where parents would be afraid to send their children, like a lot of places that I
Yeah,
would have been going to growing up. And not necessarily because you're taking the edge or the grit out of the music, but just because you're fostering an environment, I guess, where even though there may not be a worship band playing, but in some way it's a venue that seeks to honor God in some small way. It's a better
yeah,
version of what is out there. So yeah, that's my passion, I guess, and my goal going forward. But
that's awesome.
um, it'll take a lot of work, obviously, and I'll probably be picking your brains in the future about even how you started the studio and stuff. But it's a big venture for someone that has, I guess, nothing in their pocket, just to
Yeah,
go out on a limb.
I mean,
Yeah,
I remember when I quit the band and I had nothing.
yeah,
And I was also, um, and then I was going to get married. I got married pretty quickly after I left the band. Um, I remember how am I going to provide for this family of mine? And so
yeah,
we rented an apartment that was like $300 a month. It was 350 a month.
right,
It was a tiny. It was like 400
yeah,
square feet. Um, and my studio was. I was renting this little space 2 blocks away from the apartment. So I didn't have I didn't have gas and I didn't have to buy
yeah,
a car. And so I'm
right,
just like walk to the studio and I work at the studio. I saved wherever I could,
mm,
and I took on as much awful work as I could.
yeah,
And then for a band that had X amount for their budget, they're like, I'll take all of that because I'll take your pictures. I will design you the record. I
yeah.
will record it. I will mix it.
And
And
likewise, with a music venue, it's gonna have to be someone wants to do a yoga class in the afternoon, like come use
yeah,
the space whatever way you
yeah.
want to do it.
And
Just, I guess, being resourceful.
what's cool about that too is that you're going to find just an incredible community because you're finding creative ways to survive. And
I hope so.
You're just going to be open, I think, to ideas like a yoga studio where suddenly there's going to be a group of people that are relying on your space, and they're going to just build the energy of what's happening there. I think that's
right.
really
And like a community hub, I guess, where people are like you just I guess through familiarity and comfort with somewhere is you'll want to spend more time there. Like if you feel like you can go and just have a quiet night out while listening to jazz music, you can find it there. Or else if you want to go and listen to some rock band or a metal band, that you'll find it there as well. It's just I guess a community hub where people can feel comfortable and there's something for everyone. So
you're doing coffee too.
Uh, like coffee, like as in just like a coffee shop during the day, or like as I was thinking of potentially looking into that, but I don't know whether to do. My wife was talking maybe about doing a coffee shop as a standalone thing somewhere else, because again she says there's nowhere people can intentionally sit other than Starbucks and an environment where people can sit and relax. So it's something to think about for sure, like ways to utilize it during the day. But even during the shows and stuff, I was thinking of getting like local food trucks in to come and provide food, and it'll give them some business, and I won't have to have a kitchen, So it's just there's a lot of thought going into it, but the main thing is getting the visa sorted to get over. I'm married, which should make it easier, but it's the time, and then also getting the funding to make something like that happen.
Yeah.
But I think it's a British thing as well well, maybe not in all cases, but like to have the downtown area. It's not always something that I've discovered in America. It's not always something that people value, I guess, like having things in a walkable downtown area, whereas in the UK it would be unthinkable to have that, or not to have that. So I think like there's what they call a historic downtown in Lake City, and I think there's a lot of people kind of moving in and making it sort of more resemble what it maybe was 100 years ago. But that's something as well. It's like a red line thing for me to have it in a downtown area where there's other things popping up, and it becomes like something that people can spend an evening in. They can go and get food and then come and listen to music or go to the coffee shop, like have a safe community hub.
Yeah,
but
you want to be their spot, man. You want to be like, we'll meet
just
there at 4. We'll get coffee. We'll get food truck. We'll see the show.
Absolutely.
That's your jam, man. I love that.
That's the goal. But it's very early days, but like I just thought now is the right time to do it. Like you had to step out on a limb with the band, I guess, and just if you weren't married or the guys didn't have kids or whatever, like you just have to. We're married, but we don't have any kids and don't have any commitments really. So I think I don't want to like. I think the thing that pushed me the most was seeing people in the office around me and work that just they got into their 30s and like late 30s and just thought like all these dreams I have for my life, like I've been in the office for 12 years and like they basically like begged me not to go down the same route because they like you could see it in their eyes that they had dreams and then didn't follow them just because they got too comfortable, I guess, just with the security of a desk job. So that's what's driving me the most, I think.
Man, that's great. I love that. And I just encourage that. I'm going to say, go for it. You will do it. You're going to do
Thanks
it.
Thanks so much. Yeah, I appreciate that. I
appreciate
appreciate that a lot.
So Kate's, my wife's parents that live in Florida. And so we'll probably we drive to Nashville, which is halfway.
Yeah.
And then we go all the way to the southern tip of Florida where they live, visit them. But someday, man, I want to pop by.
Yeah,
that historic downtown section, have a coffee.
Just as you come into Florida, you'll be coming in, I guess. Well, let me think. Yeah, you'll be coming down the interstate from Georgia, probably coming from from Atlanta and then downwards. So, it would like Lake City's just off I-10 and I-75. I think the two that intersect. So it's super convenient for if you're heading downwards.
I'll be there, man. We'll do this.
Yeah. I'll be sending you the invite, so you'll be expecting that. But it's I mean, I love Nashville as well. We've talked about moving to Nashville, and that's something definitely further down the line. I guess it's the vibe of Music City, really. But all for another day.
My building here has a downstairs that is, I think, being vacated pretty soon. So if you wanted to put your coffee shop / music venue here, that'd be great.
Yeah, Lincoln, Nebraska, isn't it?
Nebraska, man, right in
Lincoln,
the heart,
Nebraska.
the middle
What's
of
it
the.
like? What's the vibe like?
It's great. I mean, you're talking about that European mindset where you have the city. I love the city square.
Yeah,
When I was in
me
Rome
too.
and Florence and Ireland, Scotland, there's that square where all the businesses face
Yeah,
in.
like the city hall and like all that kind of stuff is all.
You're hanging out in the park, and there's a lot of walking paths, and you're like in it.
Yeah, yeah.
In America. There is some of that, but um, everybody drives cars, and
Mhm.
and everyone's fiercely independent.
Mhm.
So Nebraskans,
Yeah.
they're like, if I can't park right outside the building I'm going to, I'm
Yeah, I
out.
think that's the same with Florida. Like,
It's ridiculous.
yeah. Well, it's I got a big shock to the system when I visited Buffalo, New York,
Oh
and I
yeah.
thought so. I went to I was working in Toronto for the summer, or near, sorry, 3 hours north, but came and like stayed in Toronto for a week, and then went down to see U2 in the Bills Stadium there in Buffalo, and I thought, well, I've got, I don't know, 200 Canadian dollars in my pocket. I'll just go into the downtown area, find a bank, swap it over,
Mhm.
then get a bus out. I was still thinking like a European, but then going into the downtown area, it was like just offices, no retail, just desolate,
Yeah.
like people lying around the streets, like all homeless people and people like even catcalling and all. Like it's just like a gross area to be in. I thought, well, is this what American cities are like? Is it just like the
And it's not
downtown is
all
just,
that for sure. I don't know if
yeah.
you've done much traveling in the States, but there are those sectors, and you're just like, man,
Well, like New
I
York
can't.
is like awesome, and Boston is awesome, and I
Mhm.
think I've been to Nashville, obviously another awesome place, like down in Broadway in Nashville is great. There's definitely like cities I've been to that are better, but there's a lot that are like very utilitarian, I think, as well,
Mhm.
and it's even Lake City's a bit like that, where like they call it the historic downtown. It's not very historic compared to like European cities, for example, but
We only have
hundreds
a
of years.
couple hundred years, man.
Yeah, yeah, like well, the downtown area is like 100 years old, so
Yeah.
it's a funny thing for me. Like that's our newer buildings are like 100 years old,
Yeah.
but yeah, like so that's a place where you go in and you get out, and it's not like somewhere you would spend your time. So I guess that's something I'd love to work towards wherever I am, like making
I
that,
love that. Yeah.
you know. So it's just somewhere people can be proud of, and spend time and relax, you know.
Because whenever
That's the
we
goal.
travel, I feel the same way. I'm like, man, why don't we do this? Why don't we do the square? The square is
Yeah.
like the thing.
Hmm.
You want to take your kids on a walk. You want to get on the bus
Yeah.
and then get to downtown on the bus, and then just
Just
walk around.
discover, yeah, just discover the whole.
And then instead of drive your car to your one store and then go back out.
Well,
So
it sort of mirrors how you said about music and stuff, even in a way. Like people consume, they go to, like it's like one single, you go to one store, you buy your
yeah,
stuff, and you get out. Like it's, instead of experiencing the city, you consume your individual things for a very limited purpose. And I guess that, it's interesting to think of it that way, that it's the experience that's missing in those places where there isn't maybe that feeling. But let's guess that
so
a metaphor works for that.
there's something in there. There's a concept there. It's like we're tailoring our own artistic world. We're tailoring our own business world. We're tailoring our own like commercial our the economy of our how do we get our stuff now we just get it on Amazon.
Yeah, well, that's why like malls even are dying. Like malls were meant to be the downfall of the downtown area, because people could just drive and park and get all the stuff there at their fingertips. But now even they're defunct because you can get it all dropped to your house. So like it's, retailers are going to have to think of ways to give people an experience why they want to go and leave the comfort of their house.
Yeah. So do we fight against that or do we embrace it and try to shape it? I don't know. It's
Uh,
I love your approach to it. I'm gonna move in
yeah,
here. I'm gonna make a spot where people say I have to be here. I
yeah,
want to be here all afternoon. I don't want to see the show tonight.
yeah.
And I
That's the
mean
goal.
everybody that's important to me is gonna be here this afternoon with me.
Yeah, and the positive experiences that come from that are what make, that's what makes memories, makes things memorable and stick with you. Like you'll enjoy that band a little bit more if you've seen them live rather than just
Yeah.
having their, or like even if you're just downtown, you discover something new because you're open to finding or exploring. It's like that. mindset of going and just seeing what happens. Like that's something that you would miss just by having to just drive somewhere. Like that's why I said like the realtors in the area. Like I said, I don't want somewhere where it's like some warehouse on the outskirts of town. Like even though it's a much bigger space that would suit us better. Like I'd rather have the pokey historic little bank building downtown that's got the character, because
Yeah.
like it's people, if people are in the downtown area and there's new restaurants popping up, which there has been, and like new cafes and things, like people then are in a posture where they're willing to walk and explore and find new things. And if you have to go and drive somewhere, like who's going to just rock up for like a bunch of 16, 17 year olds out of high school that maybe making great music but they haven't heard of them, you know?
Yeah.
They got no connection. So yeah, that's a big part of it as well, like the being able, like just being somewhere where people are willing to discover, you know. So
I love it,
big,
man.
it's a big thing, but I guess we should probably wrap this up because I don't want to keep you too much longer. But it's been a great conversation.
Yeah.
We should do this again someday. It's been awesome. But
I mean, we
um,
touched on some stuff. There's a whole nother world that we could talk about.
absolutely, yeah. It's just that's every show that I've done. I think I've come out of thinking that wasn't enough time. Like we could talk about so
Yeah.
much more. But anyway, yeah, thanks so much. And
Yeah.
thanks so much to everyone who has joined and listened to this episode. Hope you enjoyed it. Leave your comments below and like it if you found this interesting. And if you enjoy all our episodes, make sure you hit subscribe so you get them as soon as possible when they come out. But that's all for this week. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. And yeah, we'll see you next time on the two things you shouldn't talk about.